Hi, welcome back to the M2M project. Sebastian MacLean here with the show where we say, fight the darkness, put truth in story. It is my honor to be interviewing filmmaker Lubomir Arsov today, who is the filmmaker for an animated film that I recently came across and was quite impressed by called Kingdom. Welcome to the show, Lubomir. It's awesome to be able to talk to you.
Thanks for having me, Sebastian. It's a pleasure. I always enjoy these conversations.
Likewise, yeah, and I'll be honest with you. Usually, I prepare, just some kind of rough sketched out six questions, kind of topics in case the conversation lags. I didn't do that in this case because I didn't want to box us in because what you've done is quite an impressive piece of work that has a lot to say, I think. So I just wanted to kind of let that conversation flow. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to make the animated film Kingdom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also feel it's great to just follow the conversation where it goes. Kingdom is a short animated film. It's 14 minutes long, and it's my second personal short film. I have my first film being In Shadow, which was released on YouTube in 2017. And I've worked in the animation industry for over 15 years now on TV, film, in development for a variety of the bigger studios, small studios, etc. In all aspects of production, from storyboarding, layout drawings, art direction, character design, directing, and most recently directing, writing. So with my industry work, I've got to cut my teeth with my craft, work with really great people, but I've always had my eyes on expressing myself in a personal way. And as we all know, that's not always easy to do, especially in animation because it's so laborious. It's also quite expensive to put a team together. So usually in these small passion projects, you have a dedicated team of people who want to contribute to a unified vision. With me, for various reasons, I've generally done it almost alone. And in the case of Kingdom, I had just come off of directing the one of the reboots of He-Man for Netflix, and was in the middle of making a short animated episode for something called the Red Iron Road series, which is a horror animated horror tales based on Eastern European folk tales. And as
I
I was
just,
doing that,
sorry, I was
yeah.
just going to say, I just saw that last night, and I mean, it's maybe a biased position now, but yours was my favorite, I have to say. Uh, Probably because it ties into this whole theme. But anyway, sorry to cut you off there.
Yeah, cool. That's good to hear. Thanks. And yes, and while doing that, just events in the world and my inner passion had me begin working on Kingdom on the side after hours. At that time, I was living in Peru, and I don't know if it's the mountains that inspired it or just the inner gumption, but I basically tried to do it in the most concise way possible with the cleanest pipeline that was available to me. And I threw out all concerns about polished work and how my work would seem to my peers because it was intended as a direct message to the public, to my fellow humans, and not so much to my peers. So I basically did it as I would create an animatic for an animated film or a show, except I made it much more detailed, tighter, and with a lot more in betweens to have it be a bit smoother, yet it's still, choppy enough to it makes sense, but we know that it's not polished. So yeah, it was a mix of efficiency, enough efficiency so that I could convey the message.
Right. And that was one of the big things I was just so curious about because and I was trying to figure out how to approach this in talking to you today because the weird thing for my encountering your film was that I had just kind of fallen into probably what was about 10 days worth of various conversations about some the kingdom. And I was talking about that because as a guy who was formerly kind of raised in a Christian home, and then I left that sort of philosophical frame, I guess, if you'd say, but still remained close with my father and my mother. My mother's passed now. My father's still very much in that pocket. My sisters have kind of got maybe a bit more of a new age kind of bent on things. I was talking to a lot of rabbis about because I didn't want to throw out the belief in the divine and the supernatural. But there were things within that box that just didn't fit together anymore as I was sort of digging into it from my standpoint anyway. But when I started discussing the concept of kingdom, it came up in a conversation my dad was having with a few people on Zoom one day, and then I started talking about this idea with my sister. There was a unifying element about it, or at least I felt there might be, despite the differences in these different belief systems and background. And it was also a reflection of what was, like you're saying, what was going on around the world because there was this division between people who were kind of digging for the nuances of truth in a lot of corruption that was going on. And yeah, I wondered what is it in that message that's unifying. So, but then I came around to yourself, and I thought, how do I have this? I should really just ask you what you meant by this film because I encountered it at the tail end of this 10 days. I got a random newsletter link and it said the kingdom on it. I'd literally spoken to my sister about this like an hour before. And I thought, what is this? I pressed play and there was this incredible animated, no dialogue, but music and visuals that just illustrate the point that I was sort of discussing. And I thought, this is saying exactly what I meant. But then I realized everyone who's seeing this is seeing something a little bit different at the same time, maybe because they come from different backgrounds. So I'll stop prattling on there and just ask you, what was it that where do you come from in terms of the meaning behind kingdom?
Yeah, so, ask me on a different day and I'll answer it in different ways. But of course, with these kind of topics, they're living questions, right? The kingdom is a living question to me, I presume to you as well with your inquiry into it. And so, because it's larger than our limited mind's ability to grasp, we're always shooting for that target. And the intention with this idealized state, this ideal of the kingdom, even if we're not mystically inclined and haven't tapped into that space, perhaps touched what that impeccable space may be, um, even if we're just being pragmatic humans, it's wise to shoot toward an ideal in which there's a sort of a pristine reality, of course, without getting fanatical and utopian about it, because this is beyond human utopias. This is an ever-present state, an ever-present reality of reality with a capital R. But what is it to me, or why did I make it? We're the way I see it is we're in a precipice of time, and a lot of us are seeing this. Some of us are beginning to see it. Some of us have seen it for a while. Of course, the word crisis is thrown around very generously, and I wouldn't disagree. We're in a crisis, and to me, the main crisis is a crisis of meaning, as we know, and also a crisis of consciousness. The questions of who we are, where we're going, what we are doing are not very clear, as we have all the established forms of and all the definitions that we have been accustomed to are collapsing. All the authorized structures that have given us meanings and targets to shoot for are also collapsing. They're becoming like aberrant, kind of hostile parents to us, all these institutions, and it's difficult to one make sense of reality on our own, and two, it's difficult to remain within these institutionalized bubbles of meaning as well, because they're not sufficient and they're increasingly corrupt, both in their definitions and their intentions, and what I'm seeing as actual malice. And I don't necessarily see that as conscious intended malice on the part of most people within the bureaucracies or caught up in these systems, which we all are to various degrees. but it's also an inherited unconscious um, behavior that just contributes to the overall chaos and degeneration of the human spark, to the soul as I experience it, and to the just to the greater, without idealizing, and I want to put something noble there, let's say the nobility of being human, the fulfillment of being here in this material space for the duration that we are in. And
Mhm.
so, having said all that, the impulse for this film was to map out, because I have previously, and within my surroundings and with my previous work, I have outlined and defined some of the darker aspects, which I think are very necessary to understand, so that we can then refine, define, and and disconnect from our participation in them. However, all the darkness that we're experiencing, specifically in art and storytelling, it's easiest for us artists to tell dark stories than visions of hope, because those are less accessible to us in our experience. I
Mhm.
wanted to give something that's very visceral, embodied, and a real call to the heroic aspect within everyone's heart. And in there to map out the path of initiation in the simplest terms, the path of initiation as I see it and as I propose it, of seeing one's own darkness, seeing one's own blindness, having the ability, the courage to rise, to create the sufficient agency to basically walk through adversity, and seeing how one's courage can truly inspire others, not in some sentimental way, but in a visceral, embodied way. Courage is contagious, and have that be just a powerful, quick dose that infuses something that then can translate into real change or action in one's life.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I, one of the things I found myself gravitating toward in the story, and I guess when it comes to art, there's lots of interpretations, but I'm interested in seeing how it resonates with you, I guess. Um, is that despite my seeing that, this is my view, of course, but I kind of felt as I was sort of digging my way through maybe what would be a somewhat unconventional but still fundamentalist kind of Christian viewpoint from my upbringing. I had my issues with Paul, kind of a lot of the church traditions that kind of grew out of that I felt maybe affected the Gospels, and that was why I kind of wanted to go to the root of things, at least in that faith tradition, and start asking rabbis what these things meant within the Orthodox community. And but one of the common threads that I started seeing and maybe started reflecting on more the days leading up to seeing your film was there were messages in Jesus' message about the mustard seed starting small but becoming like the largest tree in the garden, or focusing on the kingdom first, and then all these things would be added unto you. But what does that mean? The kingdom being, well, he was a Jew, and so as a Jewish individual, there was a lot of kind of emphasis on the law, but he was making a distinction between the law of the divine and the laws that get, or the traditions that get attached to that kind of weigh it down and burden it. And so there's I guess there's another reflection on the sword of truth. This is something that's commonly referred to in those circles. But when I take it over to the Christian or the Jewish side of things, what I started seeing was that there's a brilliance about how in the Jewish tradition, the Ten Commandments, how God depicts himself in that, or the divine source of consciousness as another way of looking at it, because he orders people not to look to an image or an idol or create idols. And I thought, well, in my early days, I thought, well, maybe that's sort of an ego thing. I mean, God deserves it. He's all knowing. So he just wants all the focus on him. But then I started looking at it more deeply and realizing the incredible wisdom in this idea that when truth is being imparted, as humans, we have a tendency to want to be lazy and see something as an embodiment rather than as the substance of truth itself. And a truly humble and truly wise God is seen in this order, not to put a face on the truth, whatever that is, but if he's going to convey it, he wants you to follow the truth, so you can't be deceived or encumbered by something coming over top of it and representing itself as truth, but not really being truth, so that you're as free as you can be, because you know how gravity works, because you know how lies or theft or what, you know how these things work and where the boundaries are of it. You don't have a caricature image of it. And so that was when I went back to these kind of common areas where Christ was talking about the kingdom. He was talking about unencumbering the truth, and in my view, stepping into a power that comes from living out the truth in its most authentic form, rather than the idols or the images of tradition or of whatever Christian circle someone's in, but being able to know then what to do and how to function on a spiritual level, on a practical level, and all these things. But when you mask it, you're far more capable of someone else creating a construct and saying, this is the truth, do this, put this in your body, or I'm an authority, and so you worship the authority rather than the heart of truth itself. That's what I started seeing happening in the world, and I was so kind of shaken when I saw someone else out there representing the idea of how when you peel away the boxes or the illusions that we create around the truth to kind of hide it, and people start to recognize there's something pure about just the unvarnished truth, that you can start to live in it and it affects everybody else. It's kind of naked and scary at the same time, but it's ultimately where our freedom lies. I'll stop there, but that was my impression. I don't know if any of
Yeah,
that
that's
resonates.
no, that's beautiful. Thanks a lot for sharing it. There's a lot I'd love to continue with from what you mentioned. One is, yeah, the idolatry. Definitely, I totally want my view on that is the idolatry aspect is anytime we collapse the transcendent or God, let's say, just the great source of all being and our understanding or communion with it, whenever we are able to access that beyond conceptions, it's easy and it's tempting as humans to want to conceptualize and tie it down into some sort of understanding, into a symbol. And we do that, of course, as reminders to be able to tap into it again, because we do live in a temporal, physical space, and God is beyond all of this, right? It envelops it all, according to my understanding, and envelops it all, but is also beyond it all. So we collapse that experience or that understanding into these smaller aspects, and that to me is idolatry. It's basically not the thing. It's equivalent to the map is not the territory, right? So
Mhm.
to me, that instruction is always seek the present moment, always seek the truth of what is real here now, because anything beyond this here now, where the infinite is found, and to me within the heart, really, this portal to this space, when access anything beyond outside of here is of the fallen world, is of the creation of humankind and of our all the artifacts and all the forces within this realm that we are living in. And that's where truth and love and everything else gets obfuscated and tethered to forms of being that are not ideal. They're great to experiment with and to go on many tangents and side quests with, but ultimately, they do lead to some sort of ruin, or at least they lead back to disappointment, disillusion, and back to the source. So that's my view on idolatry. And you mentioned something about the mustard seed. That's beautiful. I had not thought of it in terms of the film and how it relates to it. But this is interesting, and I found this with my first film, In Shadow. Whenever I calibrate as an artist, as a creator, to something that feels truthful on a felt sense level to me, and then I portray that within my stories, within my filmmaking, usually those symbols, whatever my intention or felt sense may have been at that time, if they're truthful and I dare say aligned to something greater, they seem to be then funnels for many other. They attract all these different resonances from other people, and stack on to a kind of like a meaningful, like it's not that there are a lot of meanings, necessarily different meanings to some of the work that I put out that I feel is aligned to truth. It's just that it resonates to just lines up to a whole bunch of aspects of seeing it that are truthful to me. And
Mhm.
so the mustard seed seems like a natural extension of that.